Rain was coming in sideways off the Pacific, the kind that blurred the world into silver lines. I was sitting by the window, bourbon glass sweating on the table, when the knock came again, softer this time, but certain. I thought it was the mailman, or one of the neighbors checking if the power was out again. I never imagined it'd be her. When I opened the door, she was standing there, trench coat too expensive for this town, suitcase at her feet, that same tilt in her chin she used to have when she was 10 and thought she ruled the world. "Hi, Dad," she said, like the years hadn't happened. Like she hadn't disappeared. For a second, my body forgot how to breathe. The last time I'd seen Emily, she'd been walking away from me at her mother's funeral, her fiancé's hand gripping hers, her eyes set on anything but me. That was 5 years ago. Now she was back, framed by rain and fog, her perfume fighting the salt air. I could smell the city on her, polished, foreign. I stepped aside. "You'd better come in." She smiled, relieved, and for a heartbeat I almost believed that was enough, that we could pretend she hadn't sold me out, hadn't taken what was mine and called it hers. She looked around my living room, the worn armchair, the fishing nets, the quiet life I'd built after the divorce. "Still the same old place," she said. "It works." She laughed softly. "You always were content with simple things." Something about that word, simple, scratched like sandpaper. She poured herself a drink before I could offer one, just like her mother used to. We sat. The rain took over the silence. "So," I said finally, "what brings you back from Portland?" She turned the glass in her hand. "I thought maybe it was time to reconnect." 5 years, I said. "That's a long maybe." She looked at me with those calm, careful eyes the kind people wear when they're rehearsing. "I'm getting married," she said. "And I wanted you to walk me down the aisle." The bourbon burned on the way down. "You already had a fiancé." She smiled again too quickly. "That didn't work out." I didn't ask why. I could already guess. Emily never stayed long in one place unless there was something to gain. "So this new guy," I said. "He know what happened with the last one?" She stiffened. "That's not fair. Neither was what you did, Em." Her jaw tightened. "You're still holding that against me? You stole your mother's account passwords. Drained what little was left. Sold the car. Left me with nothing but debt collectors and questions. I needed it," she snapped, eyes flashing. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand plenty." The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was crowded, with things unsaid, years of bitterness, and something colder, the realization that this wasn't about forgiveness. It was about something she wanted again. Finally, she leaned back and smiled that polished, practiced smile. "Let's not fight," she said. "We've both made mistakes. I'm older now. I just want my father back in my life." Her voice softened, coaxing, manipulative. And in that instant I knew, whatever she came for, it wasn't love. The clock ticked. Outside, the rain thinned. "What's his name?" I asked quietly. "Colin Becker," she said. "He's in real estate. We're buying a house, actually, that's part of why I came. He thinks it'd mean something if my dad helped us with the down payment." I stared at her. There it was. The truth, wrapped in silk. She sipped her drink, pretending not to notice the silence stretching out like a wire between us. "You don't have to decide now," she said. "I'll call you next week." Then she stood, kissed my cheek, and left her glass half full on the table. The door clicked shut. Rain had stopped, but the sound stayed in my head, a steady, relentless drumming. I walked to the window, watched her drive away in a white Tesla that didn't belong to her. I'd seen that look before, that hunger dressed as hope. And I thought, not for the first time, that sometimes blood doesn't make you family. It just gives the knife a place to start. The next morning, I found her note on the kitchen table. "Lunch tomorrow? There's someone I want you to meet." No apology. No explanation. Just a time and an address, A new restaurant on the edge of town, the kind of place that charged extra for pretending to be casual. I almost threw the note away. But curiosity, or maybe some leftover version of fatherhood, got the better of me. The next day, I put on my old brown jacket and drove down the coastal road. The ocean was rough, gray and restless, like it knew something was coming. When I stepped into the restaurant, she was already there. And sitting across from her was a man who looked like money had given him permission to be smug. "Dad," she said brightly, waving. "This is Colin." Colin stood, hand extended, perfect smile in place. "Pleasure to meet you, sir. Emily's told me so much about you." "Sir." People only said that when they wanted something. He was younger than I expected. Maybe mid-30s. Too polished. Too smooth. His watch alone could have covered a year of my mortgage back when I still had one. "So," I said, sitting, "you're the lucky man." Emily laughed, too loud, too forced. "He is." The waiter came. Menus. Water. The sound of cutlery on glass. Small talk that tasted fake. Colin leaned forward. "Emily says you used to run your own contracting business. Built houses, right?" "I did," I said. "Back when people paid for work instead of promises." He smiled like I just told a joke. "That's great. We're actually closing on a property soon. Big project. Emily thought you might want to be involved somehow." My stomach tightened. "Involved how?" Emily cut in quickly. "Oh, nothing complicated. It's just that Colin's firm is handling the development, and, well, there's an opportunity to invest. Low risk. Family thing." There it was, the real reason I was invited. Colin nodded. "You double your money within a year, guaranteed. We've already secured the permits." Emily added, "And it'd mean so much to me, Dad. You could be part of something with us." The waiter set down our drinks, but I didn't touch mine. "Emily," I said carefully, "how much are we talking about?" She smiled sweetly. "Just 50,000 to start. It's a partnership, really." 50,000. I repeated. "That's not lunch money." Colin gave a polite chuckle. "Of course not. But it's family, right?" The word family hung in the air like smoke. I leaned back. "And what happens if this project falls through?" He didn't flinch. "It won't." I looked at my daughter, my little girl who used to draw houses in crayon and say I'd built magic. Now she was selling me one. "You came all the way here for this," I said softly. She frowned. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's not fair is pretending this is about reconciliation when it's just another transaction." Her voice sharpened. "You always assume the worst of me. You make it easy." She looked to Colin, who offered her a small, practiced look of sympathy. Then she turned back to me with eyes that were no longer soft. "You know what your problem is?" she said. "You never believe people can change." "People can," I said. "But they usually don't." She pushed her chair back. "Maybe this was a mistake." "For you," I said. She stood, grabbed her purse, and walked out, heels clicking like gunfire on the tile. Colin lingered, adjusting his cufflinks. "I'll give you a few days to think it over. But if you don't take it, someone else will." I didn't answer. When I finally stepped outside, she was gone. Only the rain had stayed, falling harder now, cleansing nothing. 3 days later, I got the call. "Mr. Carter? This is First National Bank. We're calling to confirm the wire transfer you authorized to Becker Development LLC?" I froze. "What transfer?" $50,000, initiated yesterday. It cleared this morning." My chest went cold. I hadn't sent anything. By the time I reached the bank, it was too late. The funds were gone. My account was clean, my security questions answered correctly, all of them things only one other person could have known. "Emily." I called her. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. That night, I drove to the address she'd left on her note. A modern condo downtown. Glass, chrome, no soul. No one answered the door, but the neighbor downstairs said they'd seen them leaving early that morning, Tesla packed, laughing, like people heading for a long vacation. I drove home in silence. The house felt smaller than it ever had. Every photo, every keepsake looked like evidence of a man who'd failed his own blood. On the table lay her empty glass, still faintly marked with lipstick. I stared at it until my eyes burned. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the fact that she looked me in the eye and did it anyway. When the phone rang again that night, I almost didn't pick up. But the voice on the other end wasn't Emily's. "Mr. Carter," a man said. "This is Detective Nash, Portland PD. I'm calling regarding a Mr. Colin Becker. Do you have a moment?" My hand tightened around the receiver. "What about him?" "He's currently under investigation for multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. We have reason to believe he's been using aliases and partners to solicit money from private individuals, mostly family connections." I didn't speak. The detective continued, "We're reaching out because your daughter's name came up in our files. We believe she might be complicit." Complicit. Not innocent. Not misled. Complicit. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in the dark. Outside, the ocean roared against the cliffs. And inside, something in me broke, not with noise, but with clarity. That's when I said it aloud, to no one. She was my daughter. Until she wasn't. For 3 nights I hardly slept. Not because I was awake with worry, but because I had to listen. Listening was the new work now, listening for patterns, for gaps, for the places where lies left holes. People always think revenge is a fever. They picture smashed plates, shouted vows, a sudden spiral into violence. That was never my way. I'd spent my life bending bolts and reading blueprints. I trusted straight lines. I trusted pressure. Revenge, I decided, would be a series of small, precise forces until the whole thing gave. The first thing I did was inventory what she'd left behind. Not the glass, not the suitcase. The little things, her old mail still tucked in the box, the library card she'd never returned, the receipts from years ago. I called the bank again. Asked questions. I wrote down names she'd mentioned in passing when she'd been a child, friends, teachers, the lawyer who'd handled her mother's will. Detective Nash called twice. "Mr. Carter," he said, "we're building a case on Becker. We'll need statements, any correspondence you have with your daughter. Also, was there ever any chance she could have authorized transfers on your behalf?" He sounded tired. He sounded careful. "Yes," I said. "She had access once. For a short time. I didn't tell him why I'd given it. Some debts had to be answered with trust or the roof would fall in. Nash said he'd be in touch. He didn't know yet whether Emily was prey or predator. I began to talk to old friends. People who still owed me favors. People I'd hired back when towns still kept their word. A contractor who still had my number put me on to a woman who managed estates. She ran background checks like a barista made coffee, fast and exact. "Names?" she asked. "Dates?" I handed over a list and on a whim asked about the Becker Development LLC. She called me back the next day with a short voicemail. "Mr. Carter, Becker is a shell. It's been used before. We can trace funds if you want me to. It'll cost." Her voice was practical. I left her the fee. While I waited, I watched my daughter in the ways you watch weather. When she posted a photo, laughing with a group at a rooftop bar, I checked the caption down to the time. When she updated her work profile, I archived it. You'd be surprised how careless people get when they feel secure in other people's money. Then I did something quieter. I drove to the church where her mother's memorial had been. The parish secretary knew Emily's name and where she'd last worked. She also remembered a detail I'd tucked away. Emily had once confided about a man who told her that money solved everything. The secretary said it like a prayer. There were cracks in their armor. They always were. My plan grew in the spaces between those cracks. Not elaborate, just a series of small moves that used other people's habits against them. I needed Colin to be seen. I needed Emily to be talkative. I needed them to believe their own luck was bulletproof. Step 1. Confirm Becker Development's paperwork. The estate woman found forged signatures on at least 2 documents. Becker's name appeared on permit applications alongside shell addresses. We had names that didn't match state records. The more I dug, the more a pattern emerged. Projects with plausible names, permits filed by quick-moving agents, investors who never saw a return. Step 2. Make a call that would make them nervous. I knew a journalist, old Clint, who'd written about crooked developers before. He owed me a favor from a porch I'd fixed for his cousin. When I told him what I'd found, he went alive the way a match does. "You want a story?" he asked. "You want them to sweat?" I said yes. He smiled and asked for a few documents. Step 3. Secure an ally close to them. I hired a PI. Quiet. Unshowy. Someone who could buy coffee and stand across the room without being noticed. He found social media threads I hadn't seen. Colin's name attached to properties in other states, different aliases, a pattern of flattery and promise. He also found calls, 2 in particular. Late-night calls from Emily to a number registered to Becker Development. The tone wasn't urgent. It was practical. He sent me audio. She sounded like someone negotiating a contract. I listened into her voice and felt the peculiar, sickening collapse that happens when the person you raised is clearer in their intent than you ever were. By then the anger had changed shape. It was no longer sharp and uncontrollable. It had become careful. It had edges and a plan. I felt almost serene, like a man who had checked the straps on a ladder twice before climbing. I called Emily. She answered, surprised, cheerful. "Dad! How are you?" She sounded busy. Happy. I let it go to voicemail. I did not say a word. Instead, I called her future in-laws. I found a number for Colin's mother, yes, a real woman who believed in her son. I told her Colin was tied up in investigations. She cried and blamed herself and sent me a panicked email asking for proof. I forwarded to her a single, small file, one of the forged permits. It was enough to make her call her son and demand answers. Colin called me twice that week. "Mr. Carter," he said over the line, "I hear there's some concern from your daughter's family. I'd like to assure you this is all above board." His voice was ice wrapped in varnish. "You should talk to your mother," I said. "You should talk to your partners." I made sure he knew I was not a man easily ignored. Then Clint dropped his piece. A short column about sketchy developments and shell companies ran in the regional paper. It mentioned Becker Development as a name circulating in complaints. It was cautious, just enough to make the firm's partners twitch, but not enough to ruin an investor's reading the paper with breakfast. That night, Emily posted a photo of her laughing with Colin, captioned, "On top of the world." I screenshot it. I sent copies of things I'd gathered to Nash because he was a detective, and because I wanted the law to breathe down them in a way they'd feel. You would have thought they'd panic. They didn't. They kept smiling. They kept making plans. People invested in their own stories until the last possible second. On a Thursday, Detective Nash knocked at my door. He moved like someone carrying a heavy thing with gloves on. "We've got probable cause," he said softly. "We can make arrests if we act now." His eyes were tired in a way that matched mine from those sleepless nights. I looked at him, then at the old family portrait on the mantel. The man in it had hair that caught the sunlight like a halo. He looked like a man who had always tried to believe the best in people. I'd been that man. The years had taught me better. "How many?" I asked. "As many as we need," Nash said. "You sure?" I asked. "You'll have it clean? No leaks?" He nodded. "We'll coordinate. We'll get them in cuffs. But we need them to overreach first, so the charges are clear." That was the last piece. Let them overreach. Let their hubris be the rope. I went to bed that night without thinking about sleep. The plan was no longer something I held. It moved through people, through Clint's article, through the PI's threads, through a mother's frightened call. It fed itself. The net had been tied. Before dawn, I made a list. Names, addresses, times. It read like a blueprint. I double-checked everything. Then I wrote one thing at the bottom in heavy ink. Not for revenge. For truth. Because there is a difference. I promised myself then that whatever happened next would be cold and measured. I would not cheer. I would not humiliate beyond the truth. I wanted only one thing, for them to see what they had done, to feel the exact magnitude of it, and to know there was no hiding behind family anymore. The world felt newly honest. I felt ready. I folded the list and put it in my jacket pocket. Outside, the ocean hammered the cliffs, steady as a metronome. Inside, for the first time since the knock on my door, I felt a thing close to peace. The days that followed felt like working on an invisible house, measuring, aligning, setting beams no one else could see. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I just kept building. Nash kept his distance. He wanted the Beckers to believe everything was fine, that no one had connected the dots yet. The journalist's piece had stirred the air, but it wasn't enough. It had to look accidental. I wanted them confident. I wanted Emily smiling in photographs. The PI's updates came daily, Colin closing meetings early, Emily hosting small dinners, conversations with new investors. They were moving faster now, eager to refill the hole they'd dug with my money. That was good. The hungrier they got, the sloppier they'd become. One night around 2 a.m., I sat with the old landline off the hook and drafted a letter in longhand, steady block print, like the blueprints I used to draw. It was a resignation letter from a junior partner at Becker Development, anonymous, apologizing for unethical financial conduct, and enclosing copies of recent transactions. I scanned it, added one real permit signature, and sent it from a new email to a few addresses that mattered: a local journalist, an investor, and, by design, Colin himself. A few hours later, the PI texted, "He's panicking." That same morning, Emily called me for the first time since everything fell apart. Her voice was trembling but practiced. "Dad, people are saying terrible things. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" I kept my tone calm. "Why would I?" "Because you never liked him. And now there's this smear campaign. Investors are pulling out. They think we're frauds. Are you?" Silence. Then, "He made mistakes, sure, but he's trying to fix them." "Like you fixed my bank account?" Her breath caught. "That was Colin's idea. I thought you'd be repaid once the deal closed." "I swear. That's a funny word coming from you. Dad, please. We're in trouble. If we can't raise money fast, everything falls apart. Colin's talking about leaving the country." I leaned back, letting the words sit. "Where to?" "Mexico, maybe. He has contacts there. But we just need a little more time." "Time's the one thing I don't lend anymore," I said and hung up. The next phase required witnesses. Revenge without proof was just rumor. I needed it on record. I met Nash in his car behind the diner off Highway 6, the rain drumming on the roof. He handed me a file. "They're cornered," he said. "We've got evidence of wire transfers, altered permits, multiple aliases. But we need one more piece: Emily's direct involvement. If she makes a transaction or verbal confirmation, it seals the case." I nodded. "What if she does it voluntarily?" Nash raised an eyebrow. "Then she's toast." I smiled, thin and cold. "Then I'll make her talk." That Sunday, I called her. I said, calm as coffee. "I've been thinking. Maybe I was too hard on you. Let's meet." She hesitated. "Really?" "Really. I'll even bring a check, if this deal's worth saving." The pause stretched. "When?" "Tomorrow. My house. Noon." The next morning, I cleaned the living room like I was expecting a guest, not a reckoning. I set 2 glasses on the table. Left the bourbon out, uncapped. The small camera Nash had lent me sat in the bookshelf, its tiny red light off but recording. When she arrived, she looked worn, not glamorous anymore. Makeup too heavy, eyes sleepless. "You look tired," I said. She laughed bitterly. "You'd be too. Everything's falling apart. Colin's been shouting all morning. He thinks you're behind it." "I'm just a retired carpenter, Em. What could I possibly do?" She looked around the room like it held answers. "You wouldn't destroy your own daughter. I wouldn't have thought she'd rob her own father either." She flinched. I poured bourbon into both glasses. "Drink?" She nodded. Her hands shook. "I came because I thought maybe you'd help us one last time," she said quietly. "You still have that land on the ridge, right? You could use it as collateral for a loan. It'd save us." I studied her. She couldn't meet my eyes. "Collateral," I repeated. "That's the word Colin taught you." Her voice cracked. "Please. I'll pay you back. I swear. I just need your signature. Sign here," I said, pushing a folder across the table, one Nash had prepared. "Legal papers, blank except for the title, property transfer authorization." She didn't even read them. Just reached for the pen. I stopped her hand halfway. "You really don't read anything, do you?" Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Just thinking how easily you sign things that ruin people." "Dad, what is this?" "Proof," I said simply. "Go ahead. Sign it. You'll see." Something flickered behind her eyes, fear, realization, maybe guilt. She pushed back her chair. "You're recording this?" "Yes," I said. "Because I'm tired of hearing lies with no evidence attached." She stood. "You think you're righteous, but you're cruel. I'm your daughter." "No," I said softly. "You were." She left in tears. But not before saying the words Nash needed. She admitted to the transfer. She mentioned the land. It was all on tape. By evening, the trap had closed. Nash's team executed the warrants quietly, first at Colin's office, then their condo. The PI texted me photos, police cars, boxes of files, a single white Tesla being towed away. At midnight, Nash called. "We've got them. Both in custody." "Did she confess?" "She's trying to blame him. He's blaming her." Standard dance. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "Will she go to jail?" "Maybe. Maybe probation. Depends on what she signs." "Let her sign everything," I said. "It's what she's good at." But revenge, when done right, doesn't end with handcuffs. It ends with perspective. 2 days later, Clint's paper ran the full story: local developers arrested in fraud scandal. It didn't mention names, but anyone who knew them would recognize the details. The article quoted a source close to the victims, saying, "Some debts can't be paid in money, only in truth." I hadn't said that. Clint added it himself. But it fit. That night, I walked down to the pier. The ocean smelled of metal and rain. I thought of Emily, sitting in some interview room, hands shaking, realizing there were no more easy fixes. I didn't feel triumphant. Just quiet. The next morning, her lawyer called. "Mr. Carter," he said, "Emily wants to see you. She says she's sorry. She's ready to tell you everything." I let the silence hang long enough for him to hear my decision. "Tell her," I said, "that the truth's already told." Then I hung up. 2 weeks after the arrests, the storm broke wider than I'd imagined. The local news picked it up first. Real estate power couple under investigation. Then came the regional outlets, the finance blogs, the vultures who smelled blood and legal filings. Everywhere you looked, the same photo: Colin in a tailored suit, Emily beside him, eyes red behind sunglasses. The caption might as well have read, "They thought no one was watching." I hadn't planned to watch it unfold, but I did. You don't build a house and refuse to look at it once the roof's on. Nash called me one morning. She's out on bail, he said. Colin's not. He's trying to pin everything on her. Of course he is, I said. That's what parasites do when they run out of hosts. He hesitated. She's asking for a statement from you. Says she needs something to prove she was coerced. Was she? Nash didn't answer. Up to you if you want to help. I said I'd think about it. But I already knew what I'd do. 3 days later, I went to the courthouse. It was one of those new buildings, all glass and echo, like transparency built by people who never practiced it. The hallways smelled of coffee and stress. She was there, sitting alone on a bench outside the courtroom, her hair tied back, wearing the same gray suit she'd worn to her mother's funeral. It swallowed her. When she saw me, she stood fast. Dad, she whispered. I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't, I said. But I wanted to see how good you'd gotten at pretending. Her mouth trembled. It wasn't all a lie. Colin said it would make us rich, that we could fix everything. I thought. You thought you could steal your way into redemption? She flinched. The guard looked up from the corner, uninterested but observant. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. He said the investors knew. That it was just paperwork. When I realized, it was too late. Too late for you, I said. Not for me. She swallowed. They'll destroy me in there. Please, Dad. Just tell them I didn't know. I studied her, the same eyes that used to look up from under a blanket during thunderstorms. I wanted to find some fragment of that child in there. But all I saw was someone who'd learned how to cry strategically. I'm not here to lie for you, I said quietly. I already did that once when I told people you were doing fine. Then why are you here? Because I wanted to see the face of the person who taught me what family really means. She started to cry, but the tears were neat, measured, like punctuation. The bailiff called her name. She turned away, shoulders shaking, then stopped halfway to the door. Do you hate me? I thought about that. No, I said. Hate's personal. You have to care to hate. She disappeared into the courtroom. Outside, the reporters swarmed Colin as he arrived in cuffs, escorted by officers. Someone asked if he had any comment. He smiled that wolf smile, straight into the camera. Everyone got greedy, he said. Even her old man. The words hit like shrapnel. I knew what he was doing, spreading the dirt wide enough so it stuck to everyone. It didn't matter that the truth was on paper. Perception was faster. Within hours, the online chatter started. Was the father involved? Did he fund the scam? Did he seek revenge? Clint called me. You want me to set the record straight? No, I said. Let it breathe. Truth has longer legs than gossip. But privately, I wrote one more letter. Not to Emily. Not to the court. To the investors, the same ones they'd conned. I told them where to find their money. I sent copies of all the evidence Nash had allowed me to share. I told them one thing. You'll get it back. Piece by piece. Don't thank me. Just remember who warned you. The letter made its way around. And for the first time in years, my phone rang with something that wasn't debt or disappointment. People thanked me. Quietly, privately. The kind of gratitude that never goes public because it's inconvenient to feel good about revenge. 2 weeks later, Colin broke. He pled guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence, blaming everything on his partner's emotional instability. That phrase, so elegant, so venomous, cut through Emily's defense like glass. When she called me from the detention center, her voice was small, dry. He left me, Dad. He told them everything. Now you know what loyalty means in that world. I didn't think you'd destroy me too. I didn't destroy you, Emily, I said softly. You just finally saw what you built. She sobbed quietly. I didn't hang up this time. I just listened. When the sobs turned to silence, she said, What happens now? No, I said. You live with it. Like I did. Then I hung up. That night, I stood outside watching the tide roll in. The air smelled of rain and wood smoke. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the need to look over my shoulder. I thought it would feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like cleaning an old wound, necessary, but painful in a way that made you question if the infection had ever really left. The next morning, Nash stopped by. He stood at the porch rail, coffee in hand. "You did the right thing," he said. "Maybe. Doesn't feel like it." He nodded. "It rarely does. But justice isn't supposed to make you feel good. It's supposed to make things even." He started to leave, then paused. "You know, she could have walked away clean. We offered her a deal if she'd testify first. She refused." I frowned. "Why?" "She said she didn't want to see you in court. Said she couldn't face you again." He left me with that thought. It sat heavier than guilt. A month later, the verdict came: Colin, 5 years in state prison. Emily, 18 months probation, community service, restitution. The papers called it a fair sentence. Fair. As if fairness had ever been the point. She sent me one last letter before they transferred her to a halfway house. The handwriting was careful, the same loops she'd used as a kid. "Dad, I'm sorry for everything. I know words don't fix it. Maybe time will. I'm trying to remember the girl I used to be before money meant more than love. I hope one day you'll forgive me. I still think of you every time it rains." I folded the letter and put it in the drawer beside the family photo, the one I'd turned face down months ago. This time, I turned it back up. Not because she deserved it, but because I needed to see the whole picture, all the cracks and the faces that made them. I poured a drink. The bourbon didn't burn anymore. Later that evening, I walked to the pier again. The sky was the color of smoke, the ocean restless but alive. A kid was fishing at the end of the dock. He looked maybe 10. He grinned at me. "You ever catch anything good here, mister?" I smiled faintly. "Once or twice. But the best ones always get away." He laughed, turned back to his line. I watched the water move, dark, endless, forgiving in its own way. The wind carried a faint sound, maybe thunder, maybe memory. I whispered it to the sea like a confession. She was my daughter. Until she wasn't. Then I let the tide take it. 6 months later, the house was finally quiet again. Not the tense kind of quiet, but the kind that hums softly when the world has finished arguing. Spring had come to the coast. The fog rolled in thinner now, like it was tired of hiding things. The gulls screamed less. Even the wind seemed to ease up. I'd started building again, not houses, not contracts, just small things. A bench for the porch. A shelf for the hallway. Wood doesn't lie. It bends if you mistreat it, splits if you force it, but it never pretends. I kept Emily's letter in the drawer beside the bourbon. Some mornings, I'd take it out, unfold it, trace the loops of her handwriting. I never read past the first line anymore. "Dad, I'm sorry." That was enough. The rest was the same storm we'd already walked through. People in town had stopped whispering. The gossip burned itself out once the next scandal came along. I went back to being the quiet man who fixed things and kept to himself. The only ones who still brought it up were the bank tellers. They'd nod politely when I came in, like they were proud the old man who got swindled had turned out smarter than anyone thought. Nash came by sometimes. We'd sit on the porch, drink coffee, and talk about nothing, the sea level, the price of wood, the way people always repeat history even when they swear they won't. He said Emily had finished her community service. Working with a local shelter, teaching art to kids. He said she looked better. I didn't ask how he knew. Once I saw her from a distance, outside the market, carrying groceries, hair loose in the wind. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and decided to keep walking. Either way, I didn't call out. There's a kind of peace that comes from knowing you could break the silence but choose not to. Sometimes, when the tide's right, I walk down to the pier at dusk. The same kid still fishes there. He waves when he sees me. Once, he asked, Ever think about leaving this place? Every day, I said. But the ocean's got a way of keeping what it wants. He grinned through his line. Kids understand things better than they should. I think about Emily often, not with anger anymore, but with a dull ache, like pressing a bruise that's half healed. I used to wonder where I'd gone wrong as a father. Now I just wonder whether love and blindness were ever meant to be separate things. People talk about closure like it's a door that clicks shut. But it isn't. It's more like tidewater. It recedes, then sneaks back when you're not watching. You just learn to live with the sound. There are days I imagine she'll call again. That we'll meet for coffee somewhere neutral. No bourbon, no lies, no talk of money. Just two people sitting across from each other, trying to build a bridge out of what's left. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe not. But the thought doesn't hurt anymore. Last week, a letter came, no return address, just my name and a postmark from Portland. Inside was a small photo, a group of kids holding paintbrushes, all grinning like they just invented joy. Emily stood behind them, hair tied back, sun on her face. On the back, in her handwriting. You were right. The best things you build aren't made to last. They're made to teach you how to start again. I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled, a real one, the kind that doesn't need company to make sense. I didn't frame it. I pinned it to the corkboard by the window, next to an old blueprint of the first house I ever built. 2 stories, white trim, oak porch. The blueprint had water stains, pencil notes, coffee marks, proof of imperfection. Proof of life. That evening, the sunset came low in gold, spilling across the water like it was apologizing for all the gray. The air smelled of sawdust and salt. I sat on the porch, bourbon untouched beside me, and watched the light fade. You can't undo what's been done. But you can decide what to remember. And I remembered the laughter of a little girl chasing seagulls on this very shore. Her hair wild, her cheeks red, shouting, "Catch me, Dad!" I never did catch her. And maybe that's how it was always meant to be. The ocean rose and fell like breathing. Somewhere out there, the world was still breaking and healing in equal measure. I closed my eyes, let the sound carry me, and whispered the same words one last time, softer now, almost gentle. She was my daughter. Until she wasn't. Then I let the silence hold it. If this story moved you, please support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving a comment with your thoughts. To continue the journey, click the box on the left for the next story. Thank you for being here.